You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Priyanka Nayak, a show to help professional moms in survival mode to take hold of their lives and thrive. If you're ready to take powerful action to create your best life, then this is the show for you. I'm your host, Dr. Priyanka Nayak, board-certified internal medicine physician and certified life coach. Now let's get to it and dive in. You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, episode number 11. Hello, everyone, and I am so excited that you've tuned in today to today's episode. I have a very special episode today on self-love, and I want to talk about it, loving ourselves, because it's a tenet of peace, freedom, confidence, and happiness. And isn't that what we all want? I know I strive for that. Without it, without self-love, that is, you can't properly love other people. And if we can't love ourselves, how can we demonstrate self-love and also even healthy relationships to our children? Self-love sounds corny, right? Well, corny or not, it's something we all need to learn. Because so many of us grew up watching Disney movies. We saw the happily ever after, romantic love, easy breezy. We were raised to find love. Yet loving ourselves, learning to love ourselves, or staying loving ourselves was never in the mix. I'm actually pretty sure that we did love ourselves when we were born because I observed my young children and they very much love themselves, and it's so sweet. We loved ourselves before maybe life got in the way, things got in the way, and perhaps began to destroy our concept of self-love. Maybe we began to believe that love from our parents or family or friends was conditional, or that we could only be worthy of love if we were perfect or thin or achieving all the things, a successful career, etc. So let's try this. Instead of poo-pooing self-love or, forgetting that we probably loved ourselves in the beginning of our lives, what about being down with our weird selves, loving our wonderful selves, every part of ourselves? Because we are multifaceted, complex creatures, human beings. We have a ton of thoughts, feelings swirling around at all times. And of course, sometimes we do things we aren't proud of, and it can be hard to love ourselves at times, right? And many of us are perfectionists. We're conditioned to perfectionism and beating ourselves up all the time. But what about learning that with work, determination, effort, to love all of our parts, all of the good and bad about ourselves? What about trying that? What? You might be saying, what are you talking about, Priyanka? Well, I am telling you that this is possible. We don't have to hate anything about ourselves. I remember 7 years ago, I told my therapist that I loathed my anxiety. I used the word loathe. That's a pretty strong word. I've come a long way since then. I've developed methods to manage all emotions, including my anger, anxiety, stress, practicing mindfulness, and I definitely don't feel that way anymore. But there was a time when I hated parts of myself. Think about if you hate parts of yourself. Isn't that sad? We don't need to hate ourselves. In fact, let's switch gears and think about our attitudes toward dear friends or family members. Often, we have compassion for them and their mistakes, right? Or compassion for whatever they perceive as negative. In fact, we will tell them, don't be so hard on yourself. And yet, while we're giving out that advice, we are so hard on ourselves. Learning to have compassion for ourselves is a key part of learning to love ourselves. I'm going to give you a quick warning. The work of self-love is deep internal work. It isn't easy, but I know you can do hard things. If you're interested in getting out of dysfunction, or even into a better, less painful place, this work is what is required. Going to tough places in your brain. In fact, I do have a self-love module in my program as a tenet of one of the steps to get to your best life, to thrive. I won't get into that here, but you're going to get a sneak peek of the work. So here we go. Grab a pen and piece of paper, pause if you're driving, or come back later. Now write down what you believe to be all of your past mistakes. If you don't want to write them, you can brainstorm them. That might be easier and less overwhelming. This can be a short or long list. Once you actually write down all of your perceived mistakes, now this is the hard part, allow yourself to feel the negative emotions that accompany this reflection, sitting with the negativity. Once you actually allow yourself to feel those feelings, sit with them, you'll probably realize that the feelings aren't really harming you. You can notice them in your body, characterize them. For me, as I've said before, when I feel stressed, I usually get a squeezing sensation in my throat. And practicing sitting in this discomfort, this is critical in leading a more peaceful, free life. So once you can sit with the discomfort, you can then move on. Now, if you've written these down on a sheet of paper, your mistakes, you can rip the paper up and throw it out after you've sat with your emotions. And that is a form of letting it go. Letting go of the self-bashing, the going over your mistakes over and over in your head. You can simply let them go. And if you still can't let them go, you can repeat this exercise. Now that we've addressed self-forgiveness, you may be wondering how to go about learning to love yourself if you've listened this far. So the process I'm going to talk about comes from Kamal Ravikant and his book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. In any new process we want our brain to automatically participate in, we have to put in the work. I want to brush upon self-directed neuroplasticity. So this is when you basically rewire your brain with intentionality to create new habits. We can do this through active reflection, and this is a science-based method to break undesirable habits and perhaps create new, better ones. What if you don't believe it? Well, that doesn't matter because your role here is to lay down a new pathway, connect the neural pathways in your brain so that your mind and body will respond automatically. So let's go over his process. Step 1, he talks about a mental loop. This is a thought loop that's basically embedded in our brains via use and habit. So in terms of the pathways that are embedded that we're not so fond of, we can reverse the processes. You can intentionally create your own mental loops. So he suggests repeating, I love myself again and again. So I think the easiest way to do this is to incorporate into your morning routine. Maybe after you brush your teeth, you can tell yourself, I love myself. It does feel weird at first, but as you keep practicing, it will feel less and less weird. And you know what? If you're embarrassed by this, keep it to yourself. You don't need to talk about it with people. You can definitely, love yourself on the down low. Tell yourself that you love yourself. Nobody needs to know, so you don't have to be embarrassed. I'm kind of chuckling because a lot of my clients will talk to me and they're embarrassed about things in their life that nobody knows about, which I completely understand. But they'll worry about what people think when people don't even know what's going on. And I'm talking about, I had a client, for example, she put her son in front of the screen while she was getting some work done. She felt so guilty about it. And she said, what would people think? And I said, well, are they going to know that you put him in front of the TV? And she said, no. And what he was watching was educational. So really it wasn't that bad. And I said, yes, absolutely. Nothing to worry about. So if you're worried that there are, secret, the big brothers watching you, cameras that your friends will judge you, just keep it to yourself. But that's my suggestion. And I promise that over time, you won't feel so unnatural about it. It does feel unnatural at first. So step 2, meditation. He suggests meditating and basically taking a breath in, thinking I love yourself, letting a breath out, noticing your thoughts, and really focusing on your breath and the thought that you love yourself. But I'm going to add a little caveat to this because I know many of my clients come to me and they have a tough time meditating. They don't want to sit, or they think they can't sit. They don't have the time. They don't want to try. They think they're doing meditation wrong, all these things. And they will ask me, how can I be mindful, or how can I practice meditation without really meditating? And I will discuss, techniques with them on mindfulness. So in this, I would say, if you don't want to meditate, just be present with yourself. I would suggest a few minutes a day just being alone with yourself. You could do an activity by yourself. You could do some coloring by yourself, whatever brings you joy, but just be alone. You could also, not every day necessarily, because it might not be practical, but on a regular basis, go to dinner alone. Try to go on a trip alone. Just practice enjoying your own company. I will tell you, the other night, after coming home from celebrating my birthday, I'm going to admit this, I had a one-woman karaoke party in my kitchen. I blasted music and I was singing and I had the best time. And honestly, I really enjoyed my own company. And I know people are always worried about loving themselves and being conceited, but just because you love yourself, it doesn't mean that you think you're better than other people, now does it? So it's really not conceited in that sense. So I want to kind of debunk that myth or thought error. But yeah, just learn to love being with yourself. And I'm telling you this because I could not have imagined spending that much time alone with myself, doing activities by myself several years ago. And even loving myself, that was hard for me. And I would often make choices that weren't necessarily in my best interest and sometimes put myself in harm's way. And the me of today, after coaching, after discovering the power of self-love, I am no longer in that place. And I am so much happier. And my life is so much more simple and peaceful. All right, step 3 in Kamal Ravikant's process is question. So you want to ask yourself, if I really love myself, how would I approach this? Would I let myself experience this? And it really depends on what your answer would be. And so often, and I say this because so often we give friends really good advice and we don't want them putting themselves in harm's way, and we see things so clearly because it's not us. And yet we won't do the loving thing for ourselves. So I challenge you to really think about loving yourself. And when you make decisions, think, do I love myself? Or if I did love myself, how would I approach this? Another way to really commit to the idea of self-love is to write it down, because then you're making a vow to yourself to live in this space, to live in this truth. Writing it down is basically like a contract with yourself, right? And Kamal Ravikant actually suggests some mirror work where you talk to the mirror and you say that you love yourself for a few minutes. This is probably, might be freaking you out when you think about this, but I would definitely try it, when no one's watching, and see how you do. I would give it a go for several weeks before you quit because, again, as I said, this concept is it can feel really awkward, but you just have to stick with it. Learning to love yourself truly and deeply with practice. We have to practice it every day, or even create a ritual, a daily practice of self-love, whatever that might be for you. Another way you can practice self-love is by writing yourself a love letter. I know this sounds kind of kooky, but it's so interesting how easy it is for us to love other people and write loving things to them, or perhaps tell them how much we love them. And yet when we think about loving ourselves, we feel corny or awkward. But believe me, writing all the things you love about yourself, seeing it in writing is so wonderful and helpful in this process. The other thing that I find useful is ask your friends what they love about you, right? Because your friends see you in a completely different way. And remember, when you're trying to do your daily self-love, have somewhere that you can see you're supposed to do it every day, be it a reminder on your phone or a post-it note somewhere. Loving yourself, not abandoning yourself, is going to simplify your life, believe me. Another important place where self-love comes in handy is in dealing with difficult situations or big decisions. Because so often we think that problems are so complicated, and often they are the older that we get. Life gets more complicated. But in this feeling of complication, we can spin in confusion. We can waste so much of our mental energy going back and forth, round and round in circles, and feel like we're not making any progress. Self-love, practicing self-love, loving ourselves, is extremely helpful in making clean decisions. Clean decisions simplify our lives and help us to waste less energy. And brain space, lightening our load and helping us lead a more peaceful, free, happy life. So that concludes the episode on how to love yourself. Feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions. stresscleansemd@gmail.com. If you are a professional mom who's feeling stuck with a seemingly perfect life, but you're silently suffering on the inside, you're in survival mode, and you've tried self-help, self-care, therapy, spinning on your Peloton, but still feel like this isn't helping you to get where you want to be, and peace, freedom, confidence seems so unattainable, book a call with me to realize that it's not, that thriving is possible for you, even if it feels like that would be so far away. Priyanka Nayak, mdcoaching.as.me. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Priyanka Nayak. If you are ready to get unstuck and out of survival mode to live your best life, I want to invite you to book a free 30-minute consultation call with me. To get started, visit priyankanayakmdcoaching.as.me. Link in the show notes.